Welcome to the darkest hour, everybody, and welcome Eliza Bleu. How are you?
Hi, Josh. I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing all right. I'm nice. I feel like I'm in a whorehouse now. I just realized it's probably not a good lighting aesthetic that I picked when we're doing an episode on human trafficking. I'm like, I look like Amsterdam.
That's okay, Josh. It takes all kinds.
That's perfect. What's that?
I said it takes all kinds.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I don't necessarily know that I would fetch a lot on the open market. I can tell you that. I'm so glad that
That's
we're getting to do this. I
that's not
think.
what they're saying on Instagram. That's not what they're saying on Instagram.
Did you comb through Instagram?
I got eyes
Did,
everywhere, Josh.
did you see some of that? Yeah, it's funny. It doesn't take it doesn't take a lot to make your day, but I can tell you, and that's what I never understood about homophobia. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not a gay guy, but I can tell you, gay men make my day more than straight women ever have. That is 100% true.
I kind of feel the same way, actually. You want to know the truth? I shout out to the gays. We love you.
Yeah, I always just say, man, if I would have known that was the case back in the day, I would have taken all my dates to gay bars so that they would have acted right, you know?
Listen,
I'm
that is like people don't understand this. Like, because I'm a very straight woman. Love the LGBTQ plus community, and I absolutely love going to gay bars, like drag shows and anything like that. I absolutely love it. And if a man took me on a date to a gay bar, I would absolutely love it. Just music, the
right.
music's great. I mean, we're okay, like in a perfect world, pre COVID-19. I would absolutely love it. And it has happened a few times, actually.
That's good. Yeah, I just think
Mhm.
it would be nice for me for a change to be able to have someone send a drink over and then I have to go tell them I said no thank you, I'm with someone. I just think it would be nice for me to get to do that for once, you know what I mean? And
Well,
then,
we could.
he's eyeing me from across the room and I just have to, yeah. And then she's like, "Does this happen a lot?" And I go, "Yeah, everywhere I go. It's
Every
just
day, every day.
all the time. That's what it's like." Be great to live in that fantasy world for a day. But yeah, speaking of unwanted attention, no, that's a terrible segue.
A horrible
First of
segue.
all, yeah, first of all, I'm so glad that you're on and you're willing to do this. And the thing I love about the darkest hour, this podcast generally. The format is kind of crazy because generally we have comedians on, and the sort of the method of the podcast is for people to kind of talk about how they go through tough experiences in life, tragedy, personal tragedies or traumas, and how they turn those things into comedy. And you're not a comedian, but you've experienced some pretty crazy stuff that I think you're now turning into, very good work. So, I mean, where do we begin with telling your story? I'm sure there are some people out there that are watching that, know you, and then I'm sure there are people out there who are like, "Who is Eliza Blue?"
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, thank you so much for having me, Josh. I'm a survivor of human trafficking. I'm also an advocate for those affected by human trafficking. I was groomed at age 15, and I was sex trafficked at age 17 in Los Angeles, California. And I was sold for five hundred
It's
dollars.
kind of what we're known for, right?
I don't, I don't like to generalize. I don't
No,
like to
I meant
generalize.
I meant traffic in general, Eliza. Los Angeles, famous for its traffic, and apparently some of that is also human.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, humans are the new oil and drugs and illicit guns and black market guns. Humans, you can use for labor or sex multiple times, and drugs and illicit and black market oil you can only use once. So,
Yeah, it's something I read in your article. There's a very good story
mm,
up if people want to see that on Evie. It's linked on your Twitter, and I'm sure people can go find it there. But I remember that line really stuck with me. You said
mhm.
that's the thing that makes it so sort of not just heartbreaking, but so lucrative is that humans are the only thing that can really be trafficked over and over and over again, unlike like limited resources or guns or whatever.
Well, guns you can use multiple times, like humans. So, I always remind folks that when we're talking about human trafficking, we're talking about forced product coercion for the sale of labor or sex, and you can use a human countless times for those purposes. So that's where we see some really heartbreaking data and statistics. And I'm grateful that you read that article. That article has done really well, and I'm really excited about it. It was the first thing I've ever written besides my locals blogs, and it was kind of awesome to write that article because it was like I got to say everything that I want to say in interviews. And it's kind of like I put it all out there. So I'm grateful that so many folks have had an opportunity to read it.
What do you think is the biggest misconception that people have when they hear the words human trafficking?
Kidnapping. Kidnapping is
Yeah.
definitely the highest misconception. Also, I think folks don't realize that when we're talking about human trafficking, we can be talking about the sale of black market human organs, illegal adoption, in some cases, child marriage. So the list goes on and on. It also includes digital sex trafficking, sextortion, and all those other fun things, child sexual abuse material. We get really dicey. It's such a broad term. So I always just try to give folks the actual truth of what's going on, the actual data and statistics. But I think by far, kidnapping is probably the biggest rumor. Fortunately, in the United States, that's not what the data and statistics show us. They show us that in the 90th percentile, we're seeing folks that know their traffickers and have a pre-existing relationship. I would be a perfect example of that. My traffickers grew me for 2 years before I was actually sex trafficked. So that's a perfect example. We see a lot of grooming online with children. So, a lot of times folks know their abusers beforehand. So kidnapping
Well,
is very rare.
well, and I remember reading in that story, you said yours had started with like a bogus modeling contract, and these to
Mhm.
me are like the nightmare stories of, someone moves to Los Angeles trying to pursue a career in
Mhm.
entertainment and modeling, and I don't know all the details of your story, but it sounds like it kind of starts in a place that I feel like is becoming all too familiar a story in Los Angeles.
Well, I always say a lot of times that human trafficking starts with the trafficker or abuser selling the dream. And that could be a dream of living in a country like America and paying someone to traffic you by smuggling you into the United States. And it ends up turning out to be a human trafficking situation where you're trafficked to work in a massage parlor, an illegal brothel, a nail shop. I mean, the list goes on and on. The Polaris Project, the National Human Trafficking Hotline, has a list of 25 different typologies where we see human trafficking in all sorts of ways, including pornography and the recreational. You can even have somebody doing lawn care that's being human trafficked. So I think it's always important to note that it doesn't necessarily have to be sex trafficking.
Yeah, yeah, and that's another thing too. Is I think generally when we think of it, we think the first thing I think is abduction, and then I think people being sold into sex slavery, and it's kind of one of those things where you think you know what that looks like it's sort of like a Taken thing. You're thinking of like a Liam Neeson movie, and you're not even thinking that a lot of the stuff that you might um, participate in a day-to-day basis could involve human trafficking in one way or another that you're sort of blind to.
100%, Josh. I mean, right now I'm streaming live on an Apple iPhone. My phone was made with slave labor. Let's call it
Yeah.
what it is. If I wore Nike shoes today, uh, you know, those shoes are made with slave labor. It's really a problem. And I wish that in the United States, we could put our foot down and say absolutely no child labor, absolutely no child slave labor making our products and food, and absolutely no slave labor. I would be willing to pay more in the United States of America for my products if I could guarantee that there was no slavery involved. I think, there is a,
I agree with you. I would be willing to as well. I think the
yeah.
sad thing is I don't know how many Americans actually would follow through with that. I think what a lot of people talk about all the time that like, well, these we should have the iPhone made in America. Why isn't it made in America? And it's like, well, it's not made in America because you won't pay $2,500 for it, which is what it would cost. So, I think that's kind of the unfortunate reality is that it is something that I think is going to have to be mandated because until it is, it's just far too profitable for companies to continue to do what they're allowed to do. What I think is really crazy and hypocritical is a lot of the CEOs of these large companies will have like a Black Lives Matter charity or they'll have some sort of social justice charity to try to, help income inequality. And they're still their primary product is still being produced in inhumane ways overseas. It's just so hypocritical.
Well, we could get straight into it. I mean, big tech is one of is the biggest. I mean, the child sexual abuse and human trafficking that they're allowing on big tech, while they virtue signal in our face relentlessly about all these issues and vulnerable populations that they care about. Meanwhile, data and statistics show us that the vulnerable populations that they claim to care about are at a higher risk for being trafficked. We know this. Black girls, there was a study put out by the Congressional Black Caucus this year in collaboration with Rights for Girls that explained that Black girls are trafficked at a higher rate. So if you truly think that Black Lives Matter, this is an issue that you should care about.
Yeah. Well, and I think a lot of times these causes they often get, sort of misdirected, right? And so we end up applying all of the money and the resources to something that's really not necessarily at the core of the problem. And I think that's what I really that's why I'm often sort of uh, just put off by a lot of this sort of blanket activism because there's not really a lot of specific boots on the ground action behind those things.
Mm.
Pornography was a big one that was surprising to me because I guess my assumption about what you hear about pornography is that how regulated the industry is. And then when I found out, and I don't remember where I learned this, but obviously, Pornhub was the first to kind of be forced to really take action against this. What percentage of the content on their site actually involved, someone in a traffic scenario or, that was even underage that we had no idea about. It was baffling to me to hear what percentage of it was something like 60% of their content was flagged for potentially being, involving illegal activities surrounding human trafficking. I was like, man, that is insane. I mean, you could be somebody who thinks, you're just watching regular porn, which I'm definitely in favor of. Like, I think people should be allowed to watch porn, but it's horrifying to think that even as as legitimate as some of it is presented, that there's still so much of a deep, penetrating, probably bad adjectives to use, but purveyance of just this fucked up subculture and just this horrible underworld behind it that still exists. And so I mean, and you, I know, work with a lot of women that are either still in these scenarios or coming out of it. I mean, what
Mm.
has there been any learnings that you've had in dealing with these women that have even been surprising to you to see sort of how pervasive it is through all these different parts of our society?
The truth is, Josh, nothing surprises me anymore. I've heard and seen it all. Uh, a perfect example is I was helping to write a report not that long ago. It actually has to do with the Pornhub situation. It's called Girls Do Porn, where they were taking actual sexual assault, non consensual human trafficking videos, and then using deepfake technology to create more sexual assault videos of the initial victim survivor. So
Wow.
nothing surprises me anymore. I expect the unexpected. And as a movement, we must anticipate that this is a criminal enterprise and we must stay a step ahead at all times. We must
I
stay ahead of human traffickers, which is really difficult because they're very organized and coordinated, and it is a nightmare. They have a lot of money behind it, Josh. It's a hot mess.
Do you feel like working with something, and I'm a strong believer in this. I feel like the closer people have to work in proximity to like real evil or really fucked up situations, generally the stronger sense of humor you have to have on the other side to kind of keep yourself balanced. I mean, do you feel like it's changed maybe your sense of humor or just your overall perspective on the world getting this close to something that's so horrifying?
You know what, Josh? People probably don't see it, but I laugh all of the time, especially survivors. So people don't know. Like, I think that they see this Hollywood going back to that Liam Neeson, movie or whatever. People see this Hollywood version of victims and survivors with the ropes and chains around their wrists and duct tape on their mouth. Let me tell you, we are having a blast most of the time. Like, we are usually roaring, literally roaring. I don't know what it is. There is something about overcoming. And at the end of the day, Michael Malice did a great job articulating this. Humor is free. So when you don't
Yeah.
have anything, you can laugh, right? And so I just find humor in the smallest things. I try not to, I don't know, maybe not so much dirty humor, but definitely dark humor. And I
Right.
can also laugh at myself. I mean, I'm wearing a tiara right now for no reason. I saw it at Walmart. I grabbed it. It's just like there's this jovialness where you've survived pretty much the worst, or at least what you think is the worst. You have encountered true evil. And so once you've survived that, it's kind of like the world is your oyster. And almost it's very hard. Now, I'm not saying that survivors don't deal with trauma, and there's a time and a place for trauma, but we also crack jokes all day, every day. It's wild. It's
Well,
wild.
and I
It's fun.
think, yeah, and I think everybody has different triggers. I remember a few years back, I got into an online debate on Twitter with the creator of SVU, Law and Order SVU, a dude named Warren Late, and
Wait,
they
back
had
up
come.
everything. Back up everything. How did you guys get back up everything? How did you guys get into a debate or a heated
It wasn't
argument?
really a debate, but what it was I had somebody had resurfaced old jokes of mine. So back when my Twitter was very in its infancy in like 2010, I had like 400 followers, and most of them were other comics. And so we would get into these threads with each other, almost like a message board of like, what's the worst? Like, give me your worst joke out of your notebook, and we would all list our worst jokes. And we had one that was like, what are the worst rape jokes you've ever heard or that you've written or whatever. And so we had this thread of horrible rape jokes, and then that had gotten resurfaced somehow, and a bunch of people came after to cancel me over it. And Warren Late, who was the creator of Law and Order SVU, came after me and said, some things should never be joked about. And I said, well, also there are some things that you shouldn't film entire reenactment porno series around either. I was like, you can interpret my work how you want. I'll interpret your work how I want. I mean, it's easy for us to say that what you do is twice as triggering as any comedian telling a joke. And so, it created this sort of spurious debate between people who agreed with me and people who agreed with him. And, ultimately, I think free speech, in art is a necessary thing, and people should be able to tell their stories or their jokes or whatever to illustrate whatever it is that is important to them or that they want to express. But when we start getting into this slippery slope of what's triggering and what's not, it's like you can't try to monitor that, because it could be something completely unrelated to your experience that could trigger that
Mhm.
trauma. Or it could be something that's, there could also be a very graphic depiction that is so much like what you went through that doesn't have a triggering effect. So it's a really, really difficult thing, I find, as a creator to try to navigate. I think the best thing you can do is be as educated about what you're joking about or creating art about, and then try to make sure that what you're doing is very true to the experience, or maybe exposing something that people don't really know. And so what I love about this show is it gives me the opportunity to talk to other people about dark shit that they've gone through. And it always lends perspective to me as a comedian to say, okay, here's something I didn't know about, maybe trafficking or sex work, that would lend some insight to any material I might write about it?
Well, I definitely believe in free speech, and I definitely feel like comedy, I listen, I run into jokes sometimes in the little communities and, online just circles that I run in. Sometimes I've seen people make jokes and I'm like, it's so cringe to me, but like, who cares, right? I just keep scrolling. Some people get
Right.
really, really upset about it. Um, I've even been accused in some of my interviews about laughing too much or smiling too much. Like, so at the end of the day, you're never going to make everybody happy. And to me, human trafficking isn't funny. But if there was a joke that I thought was good, even about human trafficking, I probably would still laugh. I feel like art should be free. I feel like art should be completely free speech, and I feel like art should be free. A lot of times people dog on me because actually I had a great conversation with Chrissy Marr about this. You know, we were talking about what were we talking about? We were talking about Cardi B and WAP. And, she was talking about how maybe it was a little bit too dirty. And I was like, well, Cardi B's telling the poetry of the streets. And I was like, and comedians can be a little bit, listen, but that's art though, right? You have to
Right.
have those folks that are willing to put themselves out there and to say something that may or may not be true. So I've seen some jokes that are a little cringe, but whatever. If it's not my cup of tea, I keep it pushing and I scroll past. That's
Well, and I
it.
think I think the interesting thing about comedy itself is that it does give you the opportunity to feed an audience something they didn't come for, right? So, like, let's say you write a book and they come to your book signing, they kind of know what they're getting. When somebody goes to a comedy show and it's got a bunch of different performers, you really never know what you're getting. And so I feel like comedy is one of the last places where you can inject some unexpected information into an audience, because you have so many different performers with so many different perspectives, so many different life stories, and ways they write and shape material that inevitably, something's going to offend you or push your buttons or teach you something you didn't want to hear. But that's kind of, I feel like that's kind of how you spread the unfun messages, right? I mean, somebody might have no interest in solving human trafficking, for instance, and if they go to a comedy show and there's a performer who was a survivor who makes a really funny bit about it, but also drops a bit of information that person didn't know, it might land on their lap in a way that makes them go, wow, I didn't even realize that the massage parlor I'm going to 3 times a week, those women might be there against their will, or that there might be some layers to that I haven't even stopped to examine. And so I'm not really a massage guy. I'm too ticklish. So thankfully that's not something that I've ever had to worry about.
Well, I haven't gotten a massage in a while myself. I've never gotten one in an illicit massage parlor. But
Are there any
sometimes.
non-illicit massage parlors? I mean, to me, if it's next to McDonald's in a strip mall, that's definitely not an A-list location, I'm going to go out and say.
Are legitimate massage parlors and there are legitimate masseuses. Massage envy would be a perfect example of,
Okay.
I guess, quick. You walk in and you get a massage and it's done, above board. But
Is
I
there
see a
is
lot of.
there a way you can know as a consumer? Like, is there a way that a consumer can know if they go into a place that it's legit, or that it's completely on the up and up? I mean, is there some sort of paperwork or legal stuff that people should be looking for? I mean, this is completely random and a one-off, but I'm curious.
Yeah, I always say when in doubt, go without. There should be paperwork, but the chance of them falsifying the paperwork to put on the wall just to save face, the fact that maybe the papers, the visas might not match up with the papers that are on the wall. Basically, if somebody's offering sex, there is a chance that it is being offered through force, fraud, or coercion, and that potentially that person is being human trafficked. So, and we do see that
Yeah.
quite a bit.
The one that really sticks out to me that I don't feel like ever gets its fair share of shit is 90 Day Fiance on TLC. It's like we're kind of watching, in a lot of ways, like third world country marital human trafficking on television. And I think the only reason it's a little concerning to me is that it's the highest rated fucking reality TV show for like 10 seasons. And you're literally like watching these women marry these goblins, to escape their country. And, on one hand, you could look at it and go, wow, how great is America that somebody would put themselves through that. But then on the other hand, you could go, how fucked up is America that we would make somebody go through that to be a part of our country?
So I have a rule. I'm pretty libertarian about this stuff. As long as it's dealing with willing adults, as it's completely consensual. The marriage topic that could get really dicey because folks have been doing that since the beginning of time, and in other
Sure,
countries,
yeah.
it's that way as well. So as long as everyone's a willing adult over the age of 18, what they want to do with their marital situation or body is really up to them, right?
I
So if
agree. I
and to be
agree.
brutally honest, Josh, at this point, listen, I'm 39. I turned 40 in May. At this point, I'm about to do a 90-day fiance because it's so gloomy. It's so grim out here. It's so grim out here. Like today, I'm about to do it to myself.
You're going to be one of those 90-day the other ways. You're going to find like an Australian
Right.
guy or a British guy, and then you'll go over to the other side of the pond.
90-day anywhere because it doesn't matter at this point. Like 90-day fiance anywhere.
Yeah. I think you just pitched a new show. 90-day whatever will have me.
90-day, please someone marry me. My
Yeah,
clock is ticking.
90-day whoever. Fingers crossed it's a human being.
I do.
Yeah,
I
there's
listen. I'd almost take a robot at this point too, Josh. Okay,
Yeah,
so
I was
like,
gonna say
I'm
that's probably coming. We're probably gonna have a 90-day interspecies show coming up soon, where there's gonna be a guy who's like, listen, I met this cow in France and I've never loved anyone like this, and
Okay, I'm
although
not down
that
for
might be more of a
bestiality,
side.
Josh. I'm not trying to have that conversation.
Oh, well, then there's a limit to
Nobody.
your libertarianism then.
No, listen. Nobody's trying to get down that conversation. I know that's a whole world I don't know anything about. I kind of
Yeah,
just
and
stick to the script, you know.
yeah, I was gonna say you're probably far enough down the human trafficking thing to where if you started to get into the pervasive world of animals, that your head would explode.
I mean, it hasn't exploded yet, and like I said, I expect the unexpected, and I've pretty much heard and seen it all. Nothing surprises me anymore, which is pretty disgusting, actually, because I've seen some
Yeah.
really wild stuff.
Well, I remember I saw a movie a long time ago. I saw this movie, End of Watch. It was a really good. I think it was David Ayer, the guy who just did that Shia LaBeouf movie about like drugs in L.A. But End of Watch, it was a police movie, and there was some pretty sort of grotesque immigration, human trafficking scenes in that movie. Were just like, oh my god, the idea that the police in Los Angeles encounter stuff like this every day is horrifying. But I think that's not necessarily that that's part of the problem, but that is a distraction, because that's immediately where your mind goes when you think human trafficking, and you don't stop to think that like, oh, this acting agency that sort of has all of these kids that are like 15, 16, 17, like what's going on behind the scenes there. And so I, that interests me a lot, is kind of what's going on in the world of entertainment. I'm sure that's really popular right now because of like the Jeffrey Epstein stuff and some of the other cases that have come out. I mean, do you find that that's where a lot of people try to take the conversation with you because of the sort of that's almost like the soup du jour, right? Like that's the popular sort of sex trafficking scenario of the year. That's the one everybody thinks of first.
Well, just to double back a little bit, the U.S. State Department in 2019 has said that 77% of victims of human trafficking are trafficked from within their state of origin. So, or within their country of origin. Sorry. So 77% are trafficked from within their country of origin. I would be a perfect example of that. I hate to cherry pick, but I'm obviously a United States citizen, and I was trafficked in the United States. So a lot of times folks think about human trafficking as coming across the border. That's not always the case. And I think that it behooves of us to always speak about the truth. Folks can be trafficked across the border, and that's a nightmare. A lot of times they're actually paying to be smuggled and unfortunately get trafficked for labor or sex as a result. It's not always the case, though. Sometimes folks are just smuggled and they're never trafficked. So there is a definite difference. The difference is that with a smuggler, you have a consensual relationship, and with a trafficker, there has to be force, fraud, or coercion involved. So it can go from smuggling to human trafficking. And then with the Epstein case, yes, definitely, that changed the scope of everything forever. It took almost an outlandish situation and brought it into a pop culture conversation. So I'm very grateful that those survivors have had the opportunity to be free and to speak out and to step forward. Now it's on us to, advocates like myself, to use this energy and momentum behind the movement. Now that the conversation's going, we just have to keep it going. Unfortunately, folks like to focus on the elites. And I always like to encourage folks, like, make sure you're looking in your own backyard. Focusing on the elites is not the entirety of the whole. Human trafficking has been going on forever. And the human trafficking hotline itself has been around for 10 years. Our first law in the United States about human trafficking was 20 years ago. So this has been a while. It's not just the elites, and it could be going on in your backyard. So yes, Epstein definitely happened. I'm very close with the Epstein survivors, and I love them very much. But that is not the only human trafficking scenario that's happened in the United States.
Yeah, it's just the one that got the most press, unfortunately. I want to go back a little bit. I mean, how did you get out of your scenario? How long were you in, and and what did it take for you to get out?
So I was trafficked a couple times. The story's interesting, so I always try to be as clear as possible when I'm taking folks on
Yeah.
this journey. I got out almost right away when I was initially trafficked as a teenager. It's so funny. My eyes always water in interviews, and I always think people think I'm crying, but I'm not. Um, I cried earlier today, not right now. Um, I was trafficked. I got out right away, which was amazing. I was really difficult for those specific abusers to handle. That's kind of a running theme.
Yeah, I
Probably
was gonna
doesn't
ask,
come as
did you have help getting out, or did you really just kind of you know sort of force your way out of it on your own, I guess. That's what I'd like to know.
The first time I got out, I had an overdose, and I was taking a cedar cyanide, and that was how I got out the first time. I OD'd. I was too difficult for them to deal with. I was a problem. I was a
Hmm.
liability. A lot of times when victims are a liability, they will get killed or left for dead. And in my specific case, that's what got me out. So I had an overdose. Grateful for that. Cedar cyanide was incredible. But I was young. I was a teenager. That initial trauma was already there, and I went back to the lifestyle later on in life. So the second time that I left, and this is nothing rare, once that initial trauma is there in the brain, it's very normal for victims or survivors, sort of like when you think about domestic violence, like a victim or survivor going back to their abuser repeatedly. It seems like, why would they do that? It's almost like a Stockholm syndrome or a trauma bond that are sort of set in the survivor's or victim's head that makes them want to go back. I always sort of equate it to folks when they're new to hearing this information. When you think about a vet that comes home from war, they may have a debilitating injury and still be obsessed with wanting to go back to war. You're like, homie, you have no legs. Like, why would you want to go back? And they're obsessed with it. That complex trauma reads very similarly in victims of human trafficking's mind. So I went back the second time getting out. I started watching a survivor on YouTube. Believe it or not, I started watching a survivor on YouTube, and she
Wow.
had words to put to my experience. Kind of amazing, Josh. We had a chance to do a podcast together this week. So you want to talk about,
Well, that's great. So that kind of came full circle for you.
came full circle. Yeah, this is a miracle. But so after I started seeing her on YouTube, I reached out to an organization that had dropped off some Bibles where I worked. There was a website on the back. It took me a year and a half to email them after I got that Bible, but I kept that Bible. I emailed them, and they came and got me. That's what
That's
happened.
amazing. That's amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, you brought up something that somebody in the comments on YouTube said. It's generally tough with people who have sort of strong connections or strong community, and I feel like for a lot of people in those environments, part of the reason why it's hard to leave is, as you mentioned earlier, a lot of times it's happening from the people that you consider your family or you consider your
Yes.
close circle, and you feel like, well, even though this is a negative situation or bad, or I know it's wrong, I don't have anyone other than these people. I mean, and I imagine that's how a lot of young women who find themselves in these circumstances feel, and that's maybe why it's hard to get out. Am I on the right track with that?
100%. My pimps had made it clear. Well, you also have to think there's that mental manipulation going on there. So there's that repeated beating into the head of, you're nothing without me. Nobody wants you. You're stupid. Josh, I always remind people, like, I don't even have a GED. So and the truth is, I really never spoke publicly. I became a public survivor leader in April 2020. So like, I'm just learning how to talk in public still. Like, I'm
Hmm.
just now talking in public. Like, this is
Well, I can
wild,
tell you, you're
right?
doing a hell of a job, from what I can tell. So,
I'm, I'm sharpening my teeth. I'm sharpening my teeth, Josh. You better watch
yeah,
out. Yeah.
well, that's
But
good.
so it was like, you're stupid, you're stupid, you're stupid, you're dumb, you're nothing without me. You're only as good as you look. You're only as good as your fill in the blank. We'll keep it PG for a family show. But
Yeah, this is hardly a family show. You don't need to be PG at all. These
I like to keep it
savages,
PG
these
for my.
savages prefer. They're like, no, go. We know what did they really say? Tell us. They're creeps.
I mean, I get it. Trust me. We call it the gore porn, sort of like,
Yeah, there is. There's a bit
people
of that
love
out
the
there.
people love to hear the story, but that is, to me, the least. Me being trafficked, to me, is probably the most least interesting thing about me. I think what I've done since then is probably definitely the most interesting thing about me. So that's, to me, it's like boring, like the trafficking thing. Like, oh yeah, it was kind of cut and dry. I had the crap kicked out of me. I have permanent scars on my face and chip on my teeth, and I've been to jail multiple times. And so when you're leaving your, actually, Annie, the survivor that I spoke to, has a saying. She says, when you leave your pimp, you leave with nothing. And that is exactly the case. In my case, I was
Hmm.
leaving with less than nothing. My former abusers had racked up quite a bit of debt in my name. So I was
You
leaving
were
with less than
negative.
nothing.
Yeah,
I'm still negative. I'm still
yeah.
negative.
Well, one way that people can help you get not negative, and how we actually met, is on
Yes.
locals. So people can go to your locals community. I shared this link earlier, and
Yes.
follow you on there and support. And the thing that drew me to locals right away was the fact that it's obviously a free speech platform. It was created
Hmm.
by Dave Rubin, so I felt like, well, if
Hmm.
I'm going to build some content behind a paywall, I at least want to do it where I know I'm going to have some complete freedom. The part that I didn't predict at all, which has been amazing, is getting to meet the other creators and people on locals, and the fact that there really is this whole community there. I would have never met you without it, and I'm ecstatic that there is not just this community of people that are very pro free speech, but that have these amazing life stories and these incredible backgrounds, and they come from all different kinds of places. And you know when I look at that, and I think, when people say, well, companies like Twitter and Facebook, they're private companies. They should be able to, censor and distribute whatever they find suitable, and that's their free speech, right? It's like, yes, but look at how many magnificent relationships would not exist without open platforms and people being able to express so many different ideas. And I think a lot of times today we look at those things and all we see is the conflict, and we never see, like, somebody who could be helped by you might not see you if you're taken off Twitter. And so
Yeah.
while some of the things you talk about are graphic, or some of the things you talk about are hard for people to understand, it might take that for a girl who was in the same situation as you to log into Twitter and go, oh my God, here's Eliza Bleu. She's been through what I've been through, and I might be able to get out of this. And I
Yeah.
don't think people ever consider those stories when we talk about censorship. I think people just picture guys like me going, well, these are just asshole straight white men who want to say racist jokes on the internet, and we love those. But it's also about bringing together people that may never encounter each other in real life, and there can be some
Yeah.
really great things that come out of that.
Well, I think my survival story of encountering Annie on YouTube is a perfect example.
Right.
In
Imagine
the
if she
past,
had been taken off.
well, she has.
Yeah.
In the past week, I've lost 10,000 followers on Twitter. Those are 10,000 folks that could have shared the hotline and other useful information about human trafficking and could have potentially reached survivors and saved their life. On top of it, big tech is perfectly willing to censor whomever, whenever they want, but are perfectly unwilling to remove the child sexual abuse material, despite their own terms of service and despite the law. We just had a case this week. A guy was caught with 22,000 child sexual abuse material images and videos. And Facebook is 94% of all reported child sexual abuse material and videos are come off Facebook, Facebook Messenger, and Instagram. These are
Wow.
numbers in the I this year
I
we're
would
looking at.
never I would never know that. I would never have known that if you didn't tell me.
Well,
Because you
yeah,
think you think
it's
as
in the
restrictive
article
as
you
those.
read, Josh.
Oh yeah, well, I'll be honest. There were so many statistics and figures in that. I'd have to go
Yeah, it
back and
was data heavy.
reread it.
It
I
was
mean,
data heavy.
yeah, it was very data heavy. It was almost like, oh my god. But yeah, I'm saying, I think when we think about websites like Facebook and Twitter, a lot of what they do a good job of reading their own press. And what I mean by that is they'll talk all day about how they ban people for not following their terms of service, and they seem like they're out there really policing this stuff. So when I saw that statistic, I was like, get the fuck out of here. So you're shutting down, Aunt Cindy because she posted a Trump meme that you don't like, and meanwhile these staggering figures around, child porn and stuff that's being trafficked through Facebook is astounding that stuff is still going on.
Yeah, it's not a light number. And for anyone that wants those specific data and statistics, you can go to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and just look up all of the statistics for every year going back to as far as they've been collecting them. The numbers are staggering and heartbreaking, and this is something very real. I think the Pornhub situation after the New York Times piece, and they've been trying to expose Pornhub for a very long time, but don't think it's just on Pornhub and it's on the dark web. It is definitely happening on our regular social media platforms. And it's honestly time that the average citizen in the United States and around the world stand up to this one specific thing. I think that this is, Twitter, Facebook, and all of their other branches, Google, are profiting off this material. And I think that it's definitely time that they take a stand and that we take a stand and that they be held accountable realistically, because children can't report. Children have no idea how to report.
Do you think, and I know we talked about this briefly when we spoke the other day, but I didn't really want to get into it offline because I wanted to save it for the show. But I briefly mentioned to you my opinion, but I'll ask yours. Do you think the normalization, legalization of legal sex work is part of how we combat this? I know you mentioned you're a libertarian. My opinion is I think the more we sort of normalize, make it safe, and sort of regulate legal sex work, consenting adults, the proper age, the right kind of health precautions, etc., the likelihood of these kinds of black market sex trades being able to exist, I think it's harder for that to happen. And what's your opinion on that?
People always try to get me into this conversation, and
I have drug you into it.
you're good. There are a couple of things I'd like to make abundantly clear. Under no circumstances am I going to put a non-consensual rape, sexual assault, or
Certainly.
child sexual abuse
Right.
material human rights violation over the needs of a willing adult sex worker. Why this
Right.
is even a conversation is laughable to me, but okay, let's take it there.
Sure.
So, under no circumstances do I want all sex workers to be safe. Absolutely. I love sex workers. I love sex workers the same as I love everybody else. I love sex workers the same as I love you, Josh, and my tiara today. Okay.
But
I
that's
want
what
everybody
but
to be safe. But
right.
at the end of the
But
day,
I think sometimes it gets conflated because some people think, well, then we just have to abolish all sex work. And I don't think that's ever going to happen.
let's tackle the child sexual abuse material. Let's tackle the child sexual abuse and the human trafficking, and then we could talk about the willing adult sex workers' needs. But until this is tackled and until it's handled, I don't think it's a conversation that I do feel that it should be decriminalized, because we see children getting arrested for prostitution. We see children, this type of stuff is unbelievable. Human
Yeah.
trafficking victim, survivor getting arrested and having that on their permanent record by no means should be something that's acceptable. But there have been a couple countries that have legalized sex work. And unfortunately, the initial data that we are seeing from those countries that are very small compared to the United States and predominantly homogenous is that it is only increasing human trafficking. And I'll break that down. I'll break that down. So when, let's say, like, you're taking weed, right? Like, you live in LA, right?
Yep.
Okay, so if you have your regular weed dealer, gosh, I hope I don't get you banned to say something wild. So if you have your regular
You're
weed
fine.
dealer,
You're fine. By the way, if this does get taken down off YouTube or Facebook, we still will have it up on locals, so people can go to your locals. Yeah, they'll be able to get it on yours. They'll be able to get it on mine. If people don't know what mine is, it's joshdenny.locals.com. But yeah, this entire episode will be unedited, uncensored, available on both of our locals pages. So anybody can go over there and check us out and support. For as little as I don't know what your minimum set up, but I think it's $5 a month. Everybody can support as little as $5 a month and get all of your sort of uncensored content and thoughts and ideas. And, then you don't have to worry about if a show like this gets taken down, you can still have it up and you're still good to go.
What's funny is, like, I'm on a couple free speech platforms. Locals is definitely like my main. I love locals so
Yeah, I feel
much.
like you're the community ambassador in there. You're in everybody's communities just participating.
I'm very supportive. I was early. I feel like I was early, but not the earliest in locals. But I think I was someone that really got it. And also, I was one of the first. I have probably, I don't know how to explain it. My community has been very organic, and I just sort of started it. You know what, Josh? I have my finger. I've always had this way with sort of knowing what was going to happen in pop culture before it happens. I'm not meaning that to toot my own horn, but it's just kind of the thing that I've always been able to do. Maybe because I dip my toes in many subcultures and pop culture things, and I knew what was going to happen with big tech before it happened. And I just assumed, because I've never really drew inside the lines or played by the rules, that I would be on the chopping block. And it has happened. I've been on the chopping block for months. I've been banned and censored, even though I haven't broken terms of service. And even though I'm really just trying to reach out to survivors, give data statistics, and let people know my personality. You probably aren't as obsessed with my Twitter as I am, but I don't curse at people. I don't,
Yeah.
come at people's looks, or you know what I mean. I don't have time for it, to be honest, and it's just not something that intrigues me. So I run a pretty clean show. Um, Even when I DM Jack Dorsey the other day and posted it, I was still very. I didn't say anything. Why? I try not to say
No,
things that are
it was
just.
very respectful. It was confrontational, but it was respectful.
I've been talking to him like that for months. This is
Yeah.
nothing new.
Yeah.
This is nothing new. But I mean, listen, I want to know, why are we not pulling down the child sexual abuse material? I've been in the meetings. I requested the meetings. Like, this is nothing new. Trust me.
Yeah.
I've been beating this horse for months, since the very long time. And I've only been on Twitter for just a little bit over a year. But to go back to what we were talking about, if you're buying weed, right? And if there's that tax on it, but you're getting it legally and you're paying a lot more. We see this in Illinois. I live in Illinois. Weed was legalized. People went out to go get their legal weed and were like, why am I paying double for this weed with all
Yeah.
these taxes and I have to go through all these loopholes? We've seen similar things in countries that have completely legalized sex work. So what happens is the human traffickers, per our usual arrangement, capitalize on whatever's going on. These are criminal enterprises, right? So they'll bring in folks that will undercut the willing adult sex workers. So if you, Josh, well, maybe I shouldn't use you as an example. So if person is going to pay $40 for a blow job, but the sex worker has standards that they have to meet, like paying taxes, making sure it's a clean environment, using protection. If a human trafficking victim has a quota to meet, if their pimp says, or the trafficker says, do not come home till you have $1,000 period, or I'm going to
Right.
beat you, maybe kill you, you will
Right.
do that blow job without a condom. You will do more for less, Josh.
Yeah.
You will do more for less because you're trying to reach that quota.
Me? No,
I
I'm
want,
kidding. I was
I
like, I feel like
want,
I'm being told what to do. I heard you,
well,
Eliza. I owe
don't
you a
let me
thousand
explain.
dollars by the end of the
Don't
day.
listen. All of a sudden, locals just sees you transferring all your locals' money over to me. They're like, "What's
Yeah.
going on?"
Yeah.
Give me. I need $1,000 from your comedy tonight, Josh.
I need all, well, I don't know how, listen, you got a better chance of me sending you locals coins if I start sucking dick right now than if my comedy makes that money. I bet,
Well, that's a
it's
personal
probably a
decision,
more,
Josh. Look,
yeah.
to each his own. Do you, Josh? I'm not judging. Listen, I'm not over
Yeah.
here sitting judging. All I care about. Listen, if you're a willing adult sex worker, I could care less. All I'm saying is, let's deal with the human trafficking and the child sexual abuse material first,
Yeah, I see what you mean.
and the child sexual
It
abuse.
is yeah, it would be sort of a distracting thing to be legislating what legal sex work looks like, because regardless, dealing with underage, underage participants or people that are doing it unwillingly, no legislation or no proper system is ever going to fix that problem, right? I mean, that's something that has to be eliminated altogether, and so it is separate. It is shocking to me to hear, just on the surface, that the legalization in other countries hasn't affected it at all. But I guess it does make sense when you start to think about the
Well,
added
it's made human
expense of,
trafficking worse. Listen, if
yeah,
it's legal in one, listen, if it's legal right across the border, traffickers are going to go where people are coming for sex, right? Like,
right.
come on, listen, this is non-negotiable. This is like, we have the data and statistics to back this up. It doesn't mean I don't want sex workers to be safe.
Hmm.
And also, I'm very, very open and willing to tackle. The war on drugs has been a disaster. We're headed down the
Absolutely.
same. We're headed down the same road with human trafficking, but we cannot keep repeating the same mistakes. So I understand the full legalization argument, but like, can we just get a grip on what's going on with the human trafficking first? Sorry, I'm never going to put the needs of willing adult sex workers over human trafficking victims, rape victims, sexual assault victims, and child sexual abuse victims. Never going to happen. Nobody's ever going to be able to sway me on that one.
What do you think is the best way that the average person can, anyone who's sort of interested in getting involved or trying to help with this kind of thing? What are little things that people can do in their day-to-day lives, or how are ways that people can get involved in this type of thing that maybe they don't know about?
This is my favorite question. I always recommend that folks donate their time, talent, or treasure. So whatever you're already doing, whatever you're already good at. Like, for instance, you're a comedian. You could do a
Yeah,
fundraising
I'm good at
event.
nothing. I'm good at absolutely nothing.
That's not what the boys are saying on Instagram.
Well,
No, but actually, you're good at networking. You found me fast. You're like, oh, I'm on locals now.
I'm okay at that.
Let me go find the town crier, and I'm in everybody's. Hey guys, hi, I'm here. But no, I mean, you're a comedian, so you could do a fundraising event for a local organization, an organization that you really stand behind, and that is you using your time, talent, or treasure for the movement. If someone's a carpenter, think about working on a survivor safe house. If you make soap or if you teach a yoga class, think about donating those things to survivors. There are multiple ways that folks can get involved. I always encourage folks to look at what organizations are in their area, research the organization thoroughly to make sure it's completely legit, because we do see organizations that traffic as well. And
Yeah, that would
just
be scary to me. The idea that you could, believe you're participating in the solution and then find out you're actually contributing to the problem.
it goes all the way up to the top. It goes all the way up to the top, all the way through the middle, and all the way down to the bottom. It's really actually, that's one of the reasons that I really just kind of rock with other survivors and don't like to align myself so much with organizations, because it's just, there's not a high trust there. In my experience, it hasn't been. There's a lot of problems there. It's really bad. It's really bad.
What do you think big tech is not making this a higher priority? Is it because of the amount of traffic and the amount of
Money,
potential income and money that it
money,
generates?
money. That's why
Yeah.
money. That's it. That's the only answer.
I mean, it sounds so simple, but
Is it
it's
really though? I mean, it's a human rights violation that they're letting continue while virtue signaling in our face and speaking at human rights conferences, donating to human rights conferences. It's really disgusting, actually. It's really a slap in the face every day. And I'm not going to let them forget about it.
well, I think that's great. I mean, I think, somebody, I think getting in their face and refusing to go away, I think, we need people like you for all of these different causes that are sort of being overlooked and not necessarily taken seriously. I think, the thing that kind of, concerns me about it is, as I've started doing this podcast and I've talked to more and more people outside of my regular everyday bubble of comedians, when you find out how many people have either brushed up against human trafficking or directly been human trafficked in one way or another, it's pretty terrifying, and it's one of those things where, like my girlfriend and I will joke back and forth of like, if you were to be a betting person, you would say that 4 out of 5 people that you meet, particularly in Los Angeles, particularly in entertainment, are the victims of some sort of sexual abuse or trauma. And I would say 3 of those 4 have probably been trafficked in some way or another. I mean, you'll hear these stories, and a lot of people don't know this. Like Demi Moore was like trafficked by her parents when she was a young actress, and that's, I think, part of her story that a lot of times gets overlooked. I didn't even know about it until about a month ago when I had kind of read that story. And then the unfortunate thing that you hear a lot about of too is unless people sort of get the right support group around them, it's possible for them to become abusers themselves later in life because they sort of repeat these cycles of trauma and abuse.
Yeah, in the entertainment industry, it's definitely very rough. People sell people the dream all the time in Los
Mm-hmm.
Angeles, and in other places as well. And it's really sad and really scary. And I would just encourage anyone in entertainment, if you see something, say something. There's so
Yeah.
many folks that walk around and say, "Oh yeah, we knew about Epstein for years." Then why didn't anybody say anything? Like, or
Yeah,
we knew
that's
about
the
Epstein,
frustrating part.
we knew about Weinstein for years. These folks
Yeah.
knew about this and stayed silent. And to be brutally honest, that to me is almost worse. If you
Oh
want to know
yeah.
the truth, covering up for these abusers is so ugly and just and sick on another level that I can comprehend it, but it's unbelievable. People think that if it's not them actually doing the abuse themselves, that they're not a part of it. But if you're remaining silent, you are a part of it. And that's actually if you want to know the truth, I'm just having this thought, like stream of consciousness, but I think that that's why go so hard on Twitter, because I know that it's a problem and I can't remain silent because I feel like almost I'd be a part of the problem. Like I like to post my selfies and look cute and have fun and talk to my friends on there, but at the end of the day, I cannot tweet without thinking right now a child's worst moment of their life is being viewed repeatedly on Twitter and no one's doing anything about it. So
Yeah.
that's one reason why I get so passionate.
Well, there's a blog on my website from 2014 that was the first time I kind of came face to face with that dark side of Hollywood. So a lot of people know,
Yeah.
when I had a corporate job, all of the time through my comedy career up until 2013, I was fired from a company, and then when I made the decision at that time, I was going to start pursuing comedy more full time, and I started Uber driving on the side to make ends meet. And I was doing a late night drive one night. I brought this couple to a party on Mount Olympus. So anybody in LA knows Mount Olympus is kind of like you're starting to enter the rich end of the Hollywood Hills, right off of
Yeah.
Crescent Heights, turns into Laurel Canyon. And it was a
You're making me
giant
miss
sort
it,
of,
Josh.
yeah, well, not when I get to this part of the story. So you get to this sort of giant industry party, and the couple, it was kind of late. It was like already 2:30 in the morning. They said, "Listen, we don't know if this is done or lame or whatever, so just, keep the meter running, hang out front and wait for us." So I did, and in front of me was sort of like a 1970s, full-size van. And as I'm sitting there just on my phone, kind of reading articles and waiting for these people, there's a lawn full of 30, 40 people, right? And this couple come out, and the woman gets in the driver's seat. She's getting ready to drive home, and the guy's kind of leaning into the doorway, kind of talking to her, like people at the end of a date or the end of a night hanging out. He's kind of just like, I'm thinking, okay, this guy's going to give her a good night kiss or whatever, and she's going to drive off. And I'm sort of get lost in my phone, and then all of a sudden I hear a honk. The car in front starts to slide down the hill towards my car, and I just see legs hanging out of the driver's side door. And my first instinct is like, oh my God, somebody overdosed or somebody's having a heart attack. And so the woman is like looking out the driver's side door, screaming at me to help. And all these people on the lawn, nobody's running over to do anything. Nobody's doing anything. So I jump out of my car. I'm in like shorts and flip flops. I always say every woman's worst nightmare is to be rescued by a ginger Kevin Smith in a hockey jersey. So I run over there, and it turns out it's not what I thought. This man is assaulting this woman. And so I go to pull him off. The guy is probably about 6'3", but I probably had 50, 60 pounds on him. I'm only 6 feet tall. And it took me a couple attempts to pull this guy off. This guy was definitely under the influence of something like PCP, or, he definitely had some meth strength, if I were to categorize it a certain way. But I was finally able to pull him away from the car, get him down to the ground in a chokehold. And when his head hit, I was like, oh, fuck, I probably really hurt this guy. Pulled him out. The woman drives away. The guy kind of gets up, comes to, and takes off running. Nowhere in this entire exchange has anyone that's standing in front of the house come over to participate, see what's going on, or help, or anything like that. And there are, in this front yard, A-list athletes and entertainers who I recognize, who are not getting involved in this. And I'm sitting here going, what the fuck? Like, what? This woman is screaming for help and nobody's helping. The guy who falls down runs away. The woman has the police on her cell phone when she comes back down the hill, and they go, well, if the guy ran away, we're not even going to come out and take a report. And I was like, well, what the fuck is that? And then, so I decide I'm done for the night. I'm ending the trip of the people I was waiting on. They're still inside. And there's a guy who's standing out front who's like, hey, are you an Uber driver? I go, yep. He jumps in, and then we drive away, and I go, what the fuck was all of that? And he goes, yeah, do you know who that guy was? And I go, no, I have no idea who that was. And he goes, he is a member of one of the biggest acting families in Hollywood. He's the brother of a very famous actor, and his other brother is the head of the financial department of CAA. That was a CAA party. And the reason that nobody got involved is because that guy is known for doing that kind of shit at all of these parties, and nobody wants to lose their career by being on the wrong side of that interaction. And I couldn't fucking believe, like, you hear these stories all the time. And the guy tells me, he goes, I don't know if you work in entertainment. But if you were to publicly announce who this was or whatever, you'd get sued into oblivion and you would never work in this town again. And so when people go, we all knew about this, it's like, well, part of the problem is we have a legal system that protects these fucking monsters. And, you know, we have a system where other people, I was like, the fucked up thing about that is the rest of the industry would have to agree to blacklist somebody who exposed an attempted rapist. Like, this dude had his pants down and was literally trying to force himself on this woman. And when people ask me, like, and the guy was like, you know, what you did was kind of heroic. It didn't feel heroic. It felt necessary. Like, I didn't feel like good. I didn't feel good about getting involved. I felt disgusted that I had to. And what I mean by that is there were so many people standing by and doing nothing that I couldn't help but feel grossed out by the entire thing, to think, what, it should not take an out of shape me for the right thing to happen. Do you know what I mean? And it was terrifying to me, and I couldn't help but think, oh my God, that could have been my girlfriend going to one of these parties with a guy friend of hers who's connected in the business, and that kind of thing could have happened, and 100 fucking celebrities would have watched it happen and not done anything. And, you know, it's a terrifying situation. And the funny thing is, I had someone reach out to me who worked high up the ladder at Uber and said, I can't believe we've never heard this story. And I'm going to make sure that you talk to the CEO and the head of risk management and stuff, because they need to know this story. And at the very least, you can tell them who this person is, and they, with more power and more legal push, can potentially say, we're going to blacklist this person. They're not allowed to use our platform. We know this happened. And I never heard a peep. Never heard a peep. And so, you know, when you talk about the Weinstein thing, how many people protected him, it didn't surprise me at all. After having gone through that experience back in 2014, I am not ever shocked at how perverse and how far Hollywood is willing to go to protect itself. And listen, if selling your soul and turning a blind eye to that kind of shit in this business is the only way to get ahead, I don't want it. I don't want to be a part of it.
Well, it's not just in Hollywood too. I mean, you have entire blocks that cover for pimps and, you know, illicit brothels on their blocks. This is nothing new. Like, this is not just a Hollywood thing. This is like an everywhere thing. Yes, it's extra bad in Hollywood because the stakes are very high and people give up their entire lives to be stars and they don't know how else they'll make it. So I understand that, but this is not just a Hollywood thing. It's an everywhere thing. Nobody's really willing to stand up and say anything. And the longer I'm in the movement, the more I realize I don't really know why. I think that they're intimidated by the conversation and they don't want to seem crazy or weird or, you know, like, why is this person so obsessed with this? But I think it takes folks that have the bravery to stand up and say, you know what, what's going on here isn't right. It's a human rights violation. This is a bipartisan issue. Why are we allowing this? Why on earth are we allowing this? I think when it comes to Hollywood, you know, I can understand not everybody wanting to lose their entire career, but at least give somebody a heads up. Like, hey, if you go back with so-and-so, you know, there's something will happen. Now, when it comes to children, under no circumstances should anyone be turning a blind eye. That's the, you know, I give a lot more leeway to consenting adults, but anytime, or, you know, to even adults, because we don't necessarily know the circumstance of that situation.
Right. Well, that was kind of how I felt. I had no idea what was going on. I only sort of, you know, it's that weird thing of, somebody once asked me, if you had known before you got out of the car what you would have encountered, would you have still gotten out of the car? And that's a question I can never answer, because you'd like to say yes, but if I'm being honest, it's like, to your point, I don't know the circumstances, I don't know what's going on, and so I think the only reason I sort of sprung into action is because I didn't know. And, you know, and then faced, you know, it was sort of like that scene at the end of Back to the Future where he opens, he's like, get your damn hands off her, Biff. I mean, it was like that moment. There was nothing like cool or cinematic about it. It was just really, I will tell you one thing. I immediately walked away from that scenario going, I need to be in better physical shape to defend myself in that circumstance.
I say that
or
every
to
day.
defend other people. And I'll tell you, It definitely made me have a completely different perspective about women, and particularly young women in self-defense. I think every girl from the time she's 3 now should be enrolled in some sort of physical defense class, whether it's Krav Maga or whether it's jujitsu. I mean, any of my friends who have young daughters, I'm like, get those girls into combat training at a young age, because it could be life-saving. And it's terrifying to think that there could be 50 men around a scenario like that happening and not one good man amongst them who would get involved and rush to help.
Or actually, even worse, help to cover it up. Like it, yeah, it blows my mind. It blows my mind all the time. But just because it blows our mind and it seems unfathomable to us, doesn't mean that we got to keep turning a blind eye to it. So, I mean, that's just the way it goes, right? Evil is always hard to comprehend, especially when you see humanity and humans in a certain way. But that doesn't mean it's not real. It's definitely happening. We,
Yeah.
it's just happening again and again. It's just it's really heartbreaking, and I wish it didn't happen, but it does happen. So we have to function within the realm of reality, if that makes sense. We
Yeah.
have to deal with it. It's no, we can't keep sweeping it under the rug. Josh, I
Yeah.
apologize. I have to plug in real quick. I apologize. I'm losing juice, but I can hear you if you want to talk.
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah.
Sorry.
You can plug
I've
in.
never had to do that before.
By the
I
way,
can
we've got to get some pictures or some background images in your frame right there, because that lonely wooden chair against the white wall makes it look like you're still being held captive. So please let everybody at home know
Josh,
that you are in good place.
Josh, listen, I'm so bright on my own. I don't need a background, okay?
Yes,
And you
but when you leave the frame, it's terrifying.
Josh, Josh, when you're in your frame, it's terrifying, okay?
Okay, well, you are not wrong about that, Eliza.
Listen, no, I'm just giving you a hard time. Sorry, but no, this has been a really weird time because before now, well, you have to remember, I just became a public survivor leader in April 2020,
Yeah,
and I didn't like, I don't have
through
a
the time of COVID.
correct because of COVID is why I started speaking out, and it's a that's a whole other story, but I wasn't set up for this year. So my light is new. I'm streaming on my phone. Like I don't have a computer. I don't have internet access at my home. I don't make a lot of money. Um, so this has been a really weird year and I've just tried to adjust accordingly. So I apologize that my artwork on the back of my wall is not suitable to your taste. I'll try to work on
No, it's not about my taste. I was just making a joke.
that. It does look like a mugshot. Like that's kind of my mugshot
Yeah, yeah,
energy.
well, yeah, exactly. Well, and of course the wooden back chair also lends to the environment as well. It's a very like back home at grandma's house kind of vibe. You know what I mean?
Wait till one of my cats comes in the frame. That's when it starts getting really that's when the last interview that I did the entire interview with a cat behind my back. And I was just praying because it's just a long story with these cats, but I was just praying nothing wild would go down because I was like, okay, all I have to do is just act normal. Because some interviews I have to be a little bit more serious and pay attention really hard to what folks are saying. And
Hmm.
so I was just like, oh my gosh. So yeah, it's been a weird time, but I've just tried to roll with the punches. Same thing with locals. I never thought I'd be a content creator. I've said that repeatedly, like being a content, but survivor, you know what I mean? Like what survivor or an advocate thinks, oh, I'm going to be a content creator. But I just sort of saw what was happening in 2020 and I was like, okay, you're going to have to make some lemonade because
Yeah.
this isn't going away. So you're going
Well,
to have to adjust with the times.
and I think, story is powerful. I mean, Hollywood loves to tell us the importance of telling the stories that don't get told very often. But that sort of results into Spider-Man being cast by a black person, and not necessarily like people actually covering really, really tough stories like yours, or similar ones. I mean, do you find that the interest in sort of some of the documentaries, like the Nexium documentaries and stuff that have come out, has sort of shed a light in a good way on these types of issues, and that people are now more aware and maybe more mobilized?
I definitely think it shows a perspective. I always say every survivor or victim story is completely different. The Vow and other, the Epstein documentaries and the R. Kelly one, same vein. Um, those have done a good job at telling those stories from those specific perspectives, but we need to continuously tell the entire story. Human trafficking in India looks much different than it does in the United States. So we have to always just kind of keep an eye on what's going on in every pocket and continue to tell the stories. I actually don't think that my story is as interesting as, you know what I mean? I had the benefit, Josh. I always let folks know, I had the benefit. I was never walking the streets or anything of that nature. So there are survivors out there whose stories I think deserve to be heard, need to be heard. And
But I think on the flip side, I think by having you say you use the words a boring story, but I think in some ways that lends a little bit of credibility to you because you don't have sort of a fantastical story that makes people question it. I think if anything, they look at your scenario and go, God, that's sort of so run of the mill everyday possible that it's even more terrifying, right? Because we go, oh my God, this kind of thing could happen under my nose and I might not even notice versus, the ones that get made into movies or documentaries. And so while you might say, well, it's not as boring or it might be more boring than some of the other ones. I think it's definitely eye-opening to people to sort of look back and go, oh wow, there are so many layers to this. And there are ones that are sort of over the top and fantastic in the sense that they have these crazy cult leaders at the head of it, and like the yoga guy, that one that
oh
came
yeah,
out. What is it?
Bikram, Bikram.
Bikram, yeah. And then of course the Keith Raniere from the Nexium cult and the Vow. Those are the ones that are sort of sensationalized, right? And the sad part is I'd say I don't know what the percentage is, but I'd say the majority are far less sensational and far too common.
Yeah, I don't know if the documentaries, I don't think that the victims of those crimes would call them sensationalized. I think they about say that they're spot on, and every survivor that I've spoken to from all of those situations has
I just
actually,
mean,
there's quite a bit
yeah,
that's left out. But I will
yeah.
say that I
I mean
think that,
sensationalized in the public space where they become,
yeah,
like the Vow for a little while became as big as, the Tiger King. So they become these sort of sensations in the public space, not really sensational in terms of, the coverage itself, but in how the public reacts to it.
yeah, I will say this, I think it is scary when folks meet me, especially parents. And I do like all different types of podcasts. I'll go on like Catholic radio stations and I'll pretty much talk to anybody about it, honestly. But I think one of the things that's most scary for folks when they do talk to me is that I have an amazing family. My parents are still together. I see them very frequently because we live on the same farm, just a couple miles away. And my dad's amazing. I was never sexually assaulted as a kid. Um, it wasn't like we were very wealthy growing up, but the other thing is I was homeschooled. So I had a pretty awesome life. And I think that's what terrifies people is like, okay, if it happened to her, then it could really, truly happen to anyone. My
Mm-hmm.
parents were so supportive that my parents were so supportive. And that's why I went to Hollywood at a young age, was because I was promised this modeling deal and I was promised that I was going to be a star. So I think that's what scares people is they want to encourage their kids. And then it's like, holy Toledo, this is what happened to this person.
Mm-hmm.
I, people always want to say like, oh, they're from a broken home or they come from a history of abuse. There's no history of addiction. You know what I'm saying? Like literally like
Yeah.
the perfect family. That's what's scary. I think
Yeah.
that's what's really scary.
Well, and I think you're right. I think a lot of times it's very easy for people to write it off and say, well, there are sort of these symptoms that lead up to this becoming the inevitable outcome, and stories like yours where none of those symptoms were prevalent. I think it's important for people to hear that because then they go, oh my God, this, like you said, this could strike home for any parent who is trying to be supportive and
Yeah.
encouraging and want the best for their kids. And listen, at some point, if your children are going to do something extraordinary with their lives, there is going to be some
Risk.
part of that that's risk. That there's going to be risk involved, and so
Yeah.
I think every parent does their best to try to measure the risk and the reward and everything else, but it's not perfect. I mean, how is your relationship with your parents now, coming back, having experienced all that, going through it, and are they involved in the activism with you in any way?
We rarely talk about it. It's only the words that have been said have been only a few sentences about it. They were one of the only folks that were on. My call list at the safe house was very small, so
Hmm.
I had to call them to tell them I was at the safe house because I didn't call them to tell them I was going to the safe house. So I called them once I was there. So I had to sort of come with it and tell them why I was there. But it was a few sentences, and then it's been a few sentences after that. Generally speaking, they don't keep up with my life. We talk about pets.
Yeah.
I talk about guys that I think are cute, or what's going on with my sister. We talk about, I cut my mom's hair. We eat together. I see my parents all the time. I saw my mom this morning. It's very awesome relationship. I love I saw my grandma today. I picked up her medicine and stuff for her. So it's like a very normal relationship. I would say it's just we just don't talk about that thing. We don't talk
Hmm.
about that thing. We don't talk about it. They actually
Yeah,
have no
that's
idea like what I do as far as my public speaking and things of that nature. They're like oblivious to it. And I'm fine with
yeah,
it because
that's kind of my relationship. It's my relationship with my dad's side of the family. With my mom is far more involved in everything that I have going on, but my on my dad's side of the family, it's very much like it's like don't ask, don't tell about anything. Like, it's sort of, I always joke that people from the East Coast, and particularly Philadelphia, which is where we're from, like, if you give somebody more than a minute to speak about themselves, they'll depress you into killing yourself. And so
jeez.
everyone's solution is just not to ask. And so that's kind of how people are in the East Coast. That's at least from in my family and in my experience. So and God forbid you ever gave somebody a solution to their problems, then they weren't allowed to bitch anymore. They'd hate you forever. So
I mean, I don't know. I don't know how to explain it. It's just, we just don't really talk about it. But there's so many other things to talk about. And to be brutally honest, because I do it full time and then I
I'm
do it
sure
in
you're
my free time,
exhausted
it's
by
like
it.
I'm over it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, I don't even want to talk about it. So I'm cool with that. I've told them some things, but very slight, not about my own story, more or less just about work.
Yeah. What's in the future for you? So getting away from talking about the past, what are you looking forward to in the future? I mean, in a lot of ways, I'm sure you feel like you have this whole new life ahead of you. I mean, what are you looking forward to coming out of your experience, and then now working with people the way that you are?
Honestly, I don't put any cap on it. The sky's the limit. I'm here for it. I believe in God, so I think I'm just a passenger in this journey. I just every day I'm like, all right, I guess I'm just in the passenger seat, and we're going to see what's going to go on. I'm here for all of it. I anticipate a lot of ups and downs, and I anticipate that I'm also just beginning. We have a lot of things planned with Victims Refuse Silence with the Epstein survivors coming in 2021, including a new website launching soon. I'm assuming I'll keep doing more public speaking, especially if the country opens up. But generally speaking, I'm going full throttle, like all gas, no brakes. I would love to pull down the child sexual abuse material and human trafficking from online. Obviously, can't say it enough. There's a reason that I beat that so hard is because I firmly feel like when we are able to completely eliminate it from the digital space, that it'll give organizations and law enforcement the opportunity to tackle it solely on the ground. Right now, we are spread too thin, and I would like to increase awareness for adequate survivor aftercare.
Well, you also have to
But
cut off the flow of money, right? I mean, if so much of it is being monetized, with the help of the internet, if you cut off that flow of income, then you kind of you can it's sort of like cutting the head off the snake, right?
money is a big problem. Yes, I definitely agree. But with cryptocurrency, it's going to be increasingly more difficult to cut the head off the
Yeah.
snake. So,
Yeah, that's an avenue
um,
I didn't even consider, is that the cryptocurrency piece of that is probably something people don't even I didn't even think about.
this stuff all day, every day. So I think about all of it.
Yeah.
But I'm very hopeful, with Pornhub,
Yikes, let
and
me go sell all my Bitcoin. No.
don't, don't,
Yeah.
don't.
Ugh.
But I mean, I think about these things. I think about ways that we can maybe actually tackle it. Definitely being on podcasts like yours is one way that I'm really enjoying raising awareness, because it gives me an opportunity to speak to just completely diverse populations that might not know anything about it. Or just only know that Hollywood sensationalized version. So maybe I can just give them a different perspective. But I have some goals just for myself personally. I made it abundantly clear that I've asked Elon Musk for his help multiple times, including in Teslarati. I've done multiple things with Tesla, and I'm just continuously pushing for the highest technology that we can possibly get behind eradicating this online. And then we need money. So I'm just out here. And the sky is the limit. Of course, I have things I want to do personally, like date and lose weight.
Do you find
But
so this is a question I have, and you don't have to answer if you don't want, but do you find dating hard when people Google you? Have you ever had somebody come back and go, "Oh, I don't know if that's for me," or has anybody brought that up in your dating life?
if they look at that, and if they're intimidated by it, it wouldn't be somebody I'd want to be with anyway.
Fuck yes, that's the right. I'm glad to
I
hear
mean,
you say that.
everybody already has baggage,
Nope.
right?
Yeah,
So
you don't
at
need any
least I have the
pussies who
stones.
can't handle it. That's right.
No. I mean, I'm bald basically. Like, I just got a fresh fade today. Like, I ain't got time for it. Everybody has baggage, and
Totally.
it's not really what happened to you, Josh, it's what you do with it. And I think if nothing else, I've proven that you can definitely take some really horrible situations and say, you know what, I'm not going to let that be the death of me. I'm going to grab this horrible situation by its throat and flip it on its head. And it's if I hadn't had this stuff happen to me, Josh, I wouldn't have had the opportunity to connect with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of survivors that are desperate in need of help in the United States and around the world. I've served survivors in 6 countries. I mean, and I've also gotten to meet some of my heroes, work directly with the FC survivors. I most recently met Rose McGowan on Twitter. You know what I mean? She shouted me out. I mean, who gets an opportunity to do that? So,
Hmm.
so I feel like if that's what it took to get me here, I would live through it again. And that's the truth. I would live through it again if I could just be sitting here.
Well, that's incredible. I mean, I always feel a lot better about causes or issues like this when they have people like you with your energy and your enthusiasm and your fight. I mean, the reality is that I think the unfortunate thing a lot of times with problems like this that we have in our society is the victim side gets sort of told a lot, and we don't spotlight the fighters, the people that are literally on the ground fighting against these things, fighting to really help the people that are there. And and I know that can be a lonely battle. Like sometimes when you're fighting those battles, you feel like, does anybody else give a shit about this? Am I the only person who's fighting this? And I'll just tell you this. I mean, I'm not, I wouldn't say I'm a super religious person, but I definitely am a spiritual person. And every time in my life, I felt like I'm ready to stop fighting. And I'll ask my mother, like, why do I have to keep fighting these battles? She'll say, because God knows you can. And I think that's very true in your case. I think you are somebody who has maybe been handed these things because it's what you can handle. And the little bit of fight I've gotten out of you in our conversation so far tells me that the fucking world of human trafficking better strap in because they're up for a pretty big fight.
I mean, I'm not going to sit here and lie to you. I have my moments where I weep. I have my moments where I'm like, I'm done. I'm sick of it. I can't hang anymore. I have a lot of times before meetings, I'll punch my mattress. If I see something disturbing, it's almost in a way, I think one thing that people don't understand is that I have been able to sort of compartmentalize. Uh, I don't know if it's a good or bad thing to be decided, but I can sort of compartmentalize in my brain almost like a file, what mood I want to have about something. So when I'm talking to you now, I have a brave front, But when, 100 people are attacking you on Twitter, you're like, why am I even doing this? Like, why am I
Yeah.
doing this for free? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, why am I out here for free? But then you get a survivor that calls you and tells you, you know what, Eliza, you saved my life when you did this. You know what, Eliza, like, you really saved my, you know what, thank you for caring about me. If you weren't there for me, I don't know what would have happened that night. You're like, you know what, this is worth it. And then you stand back up, you dust yourself off, and you get back in the ring. You get back in the ring. So yeah, I do feel sometimes like I'm alone, but then I have a lot of support around me too. I have great friends. I have other survivors around me. I have, honestly, the locals community. You want to talk about something, a miracle. I came into locals just to like hang out and to have a sweet oasis away from the regular big tech platforms. And they have been, for no reason other than just the sheer kindness of their heart, the most supporting and loving group of folks. They come, they show up at my interviews, they watch my interviews, they share everything, they share my information. And so when I see folks like that really truly have no skin in the game come around, um, I can't help but be inspired and motivated to go to the next level.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, I find you to be quite inspiring and quite motivated, and I'm glad you came on the show tonight and were willing to give us some of your time. And
Yeah.
I hope somebody sees this that needs to. I hope or hears this. I hope it gets to, if it gets to one person who it can help or can turn somebody who's interested in being a part of the solution onto it. Then I think it's definitely worth our time. So thank you so much for sharing yours with us tonight. And
Yeah.
yeah, well, one more time, we'll plug your locals so people can go find you over there.
Drop by to my
And
locals, eliza.locals.com. And thank you so much, Josh, for having me. And I always like to
yeah,
add in, if I can, that if there's any survivor out there, a survivor of sexual assault, domestic violence, or human trafficking, if this conversation has affected you in any way, whether you're currently being abused or whether or not you've faced past or recent trauma, you can always reach out to the human trafficking hotline, the domestic violence hotline, or the sexual assault hotline. They will assess your needs and connect you with local resources that can help you on in your journey, and that there is hope and healing out there. And there are a lot of folks out there that love and care about you.
that's awesome. Thanks again, Eliza. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
You're the
Have a
best.
good night.